have a wonderful panel, and I want to introduce them, starting with Mr. Stephen Karingi, who is right there at the end. Mr. Stephen is the Director for Regional Integration and Trade at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He will make opening remarks on this panel. Seated next to him is Mr. Roy Ombati. Roy Ombati is the founder of a 3D printing company. So they manufacture 3D printers and they also produce 3D products. He's a young person who has been educated in Kenya, and he's doing 3D. So the issue of skills and capability, I think he can address it. You can see what we are capable of doing. On my right is His Excellency Mr. Abubakar Bawa Buari, Minister for State for Mines and Steel Development in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. To my left is Her Excellency Ms. China Lawson, Minister of Posts, Digital Economy and Technology Innovation in Togo. And she's been a minister for the last 9 years, and she tells me her span has been expanding by the year. Welcome, Your Excellency. Then to her left is Dr. Lassad Rachal. He is a senior advisor to the President of the Africa Development Bank for the MENA region. He's also the resident representative for the Africa Development Bank in Algeria. He is a former minister for agriculture in Tunisia. And when he served as a minister, he was a professor at the university teaching duality theory and economics. So in the Q&A, you may have a chance to ask him about duality theory and economics in the context of trade in Africa. And at the extreme end is Ms. Tafazwa Shiganga. She's the finance director for Easy Solar in Sierra Leone. She's Zimbabwean, but now she's living in Sierra Leone. So shows you the importance of rights of residency. Previously, she worked in India. She has in total 7 years experience in this field, so she's not as young as she may appear. She has a lot of wisdom to add. So I want to invite Mr. Stephen Karingi to take 10 minutes and give us some opening remarks on the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I think we can start the presentation. So, good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do is, in the 10 minutes that I've been given, to try to lay the ground for the panel and for the audience. And I'm going to cover the 7 issues that you see in that slide. Now, so what's the motivation for this session? We want to talk about digital identities. We want to talk about digital trade, and we want to talk about the digital economy. I think globally we have about 1 billion people who do not have IDs. Half of those are in Africa. Now, if nobody knows about you, they cannot trust you. Whether they want to sell something to you, or whether you want to buy something from them, whether they want to set up a business. So it's important that we make sure that the 500 million people in Africa who do not have legal IDs have identity. Now, the digitization is what is happening in our world today. And also, the legal IDs, having everybody identified, is also part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we see the African Continental Free Trade Area giving us an opportunity to be able to create platforms within the continent that will include every African to participate in the digital economy. So that's the main motivation. Now, if there is anything that you would want to take away from this session, it's all represented in the slide in front of you. So you have the digital identity at the center there, which provides you the foundation upon which governments can be able to provide services, be they social services, be it the management of public finances, be it in the participation of the elections. But at the same time, that foundation digital ID can also be the foundation upon which the private sector can also stack other issues or other opportunities that lead to issues of mobile access and connectivity, financial inclusion, in addition to other economic opportunities, especially in the area of digital trade. So, what are the opportunities for Africa? I think the chair has already indicated that e-commerce in Africa is growing at a very rapid rate, 40% annually, and it is expected to grow to 300 billion by 2025. Of course, we want every African person to be able to participate in this, and not just within their countries, but across the continent. There are also other benefits that also will allow people to be able to be included financially. And as I said, we want to make sure that as we bring down the tariff barriers and the non-tariff barriers under the African Continental Free Trade Area, we also do not erect digital barriers. So by having a digital identity system, systems that are interoperable, we will also bring down the digital barriers that may crop up. Now, the opportunities for Africa are in all the sectors, be it in agriculture, be it opportunities for MSMEs, be it including those who are being left out in the economy today, like the women, also in the healthcare. So those are some of the examples of the opportunities that we have in Africa. But, so what are these digital systems? The digital ID systems, essentially, they are being used to capture, to manage, and to store the large data systems that can actually be used to authenticate who you are as a person, or to authenticate who you are as an owner of a business, or to authenticate who you are as a seller or a buyer. Now, many African countries are already operating national ID systems. Some of them are also electronic. They are actually digital ID systems. In fact, last Friday, I went for my own digital identity in Kenya, whereby the government agency doing this was able to take my facials and electronic biometrics in addition. And so what I'm expecting to get now is a digital ID number, which hopefully will allow me to be able to be recognized by other governments within the continent, as long as they understand that this digital ID of Mr. Stephen Karinge has actually been legitimized by the government of Kenya. Now, there are some risks and challenges, and so allow me to highlight some of those. Some of the challenges, I think we had them from the first day during this forum. They are weak legal and regulatory framework, including inadequate policies that raise questions about digital identities, and for that reason introduce risks in the electronic commerce and the digital economy. There are data privacy regulation issues, and there is also lack of harmonization across the continent. We do not have enough ICT infrastructure that would make it possible that once you get these digital identity systems, that we can actually be able to make good use of them. Now, we also have situations whereby countries are establishing digital identity systems, but they are using technology that locks them in, so that if there needs to be changed 2-5 years down the line, because they have already locked themselves in a particular vendor, they may not be able to have cost-effective systems. And then, of course, there is the big question of cyber security. Now, there are some risks that we want to ensure as Africa they are addressed when it comes to optimization of the digital economy. Who is going to store and to store this massive data that is actually being generated through these digital systems? So there's the question of data sovereignty, and I think a lot of you who have been following what has been happening in Europe know that the question of data sovereignty has actually been a big issue. What was happening in India when the Supreme Court had to rule about their digital identity system, it was all a question of data sovereignty. Is it the person who owns the data, or is it the government who owns this data? There are also issues of trust. We want to make sure that your data is not misused. And of course, I talked about the idea that cross-border trade may be undermined if we have digital barriers. So these are some of the risks, as you can see in front of you. So what the African Union Commission and the ECA are doing is actually to promote the idea of a harmonized digital ID across the continent through regional integration. And already the African Union and the regional economic communities have already started making progress towards this. For instance, Africa has an AU Convention on Cybersecurity that was actually adopted in 2014. We do also have security guidelines for Africa and the guidelines on privacy and personal data protection for 2018. At the regional economic community level, ECOWAS has a directive on electronic transactions. COMESA, in fact, has already indicated that they are going to launch a digital free trade area. So all these efforts are meant towards the harmonization of digital ID system across the continent. So, because we believe that our countries need support towards this, the Economic Commission for Africa has established a digital center of excellence whose key pillars is to work with African governments towards harmonization, regulation, capacity building, and of course, encouraging the financing and development of bankable digital structure across the continent. So I've raised some challenges, I've raised some risks, I've given the opportunities. So what are some of the what is it that we need to do to ensure that we address those challenges? So what you have before you here are the proposals, the principles of a good digital ID system that we are promoting. We want to make sure that the digital ID systems are inclusive so that there is universal access and coverage in country and across the continent. We want to ensure that in the design, there is robustness, security, responsiveness, and sustainability, whereby you have open standards, technology neutrality, protection of user privacy, and of course, ensuring that there is sustainability of this system. And then we want to ensure that within the governance of this digital ID system, there is trust that protects the privacy and the user rights. So under that, we want to make sure that the legal and regulatory frameworks safeguard the data privacy and security, and also we have accountability and independent oversight. So we see digital identities, and going with that, the issue of digital trade and economy, providing a unique opportunity for Africa's development. We've heard about leapfrogging. We see that as an opportunity that, that we are being presented with here. Now, during the African Union Summit of February, the leadership of Africa actually mandated the African Union Commission and the ECA and other partners, including the African Development Bank, to already start working on a comprehensive digital strategy, digital economy strategy for the continent, and they requested that we take that back in the summit of early 2020. So the conversations we are going to have here are already exercising the minds of the leadership of the continent, but I'm happy to note that many countries have already started working towards this optimizing the digital economy, and the private sector already has a lot of examples of what is happening across the continent. So thank you very much. I hope I was able to stick within 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen, for that wonderful presentation. I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is James Moria. I'm the CEO of Centum Investment Company, which is an East African-based investment holding company. So we want to build up on the wonderful presentation Steve has done for us. And I start off by Her Excellency Ms. Sina Lawson. The number that I've come out with is that half of the people in the world who don't have digital identity are in Africa. It's useful to hear what is the status in your country, Togo, around EID systems and e-payment systems.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I think we need to step back a bit to understand why we don't have, why half of the people don't have digital ID. For years in Africa and in the developing world, we wanted to establish digital ID systems, but based on what happened in Europe and in the developed world. Meaning that in our mind, in order for someone to have a digital ID, we needed to have his birth certificate or to be able to identify him as a citizen. And then what happened was that in India, there were a group of people who started to think, the majority of our population don't have birth certificates. They don't have birth certificates. They live in villages where maybe you have the village who can identify them, but they don't have any other proof of citizenship. The other thing is they don't see the value of being identified, because when you tell the people, we need to identify you, they need to see some kind of value. What is it for me to be identified? And most of our countries used to ask them to pay a fee to be, to receive some kind of an ID. And obviously, it was not working. And so today, the conversation we're having is about identifying our people in a unique way, which may or may not require birth certificates. We just need to create a database where you have biometric ID of your population. And that's what we've been doing in Togo. Why we need to do this is that we need to better serve our citizens, and you cannot serve someone you cannot identify. That's number one. So the idea was to build upon what happened in India, meaning to identify anybody who would come, to identify him as an individual with his unique biometric identifiers, but to also give him a unique number. And based upon this, we would qualify and reach the database with additional information the citizen or the individual would give us. So what is very new in Togo, and that's what we've been pushing not only at the Togolese level, but at the continental level, is to build in privacy features to make sure that we create a platform on which information belongs to the citizens, because we all want to be identified, but we are very wary of who owns, our information. And the last thing I want to talk about is that all this is also linked to creating better economic opportunities. Togo is a small country. We have 7.8 million inhabitants. So we want to make sure that we benefit from the Africa Free Trade Area agreement. And one of the ways to be able to benefit is that we need to be able to transact. To make transactions, you need to have payment system. And in order to have payment system, you need to have, you need to be able to identify those who are going to be transacting. So it's all linked to creating better opportunities for our people for the future.
Thank you, Excellency. You also not just a Togolese minister, but you're also a major champion of EID systems across the continent. You're a member of the board of the Center for Excellence for Digital Identity, Digital Trade, and Digital Economy. What do we need to do to get to a point where somebody in Togo can trade with somebody in Ethiopia and they can identify each other on a system and be able to make payments across? What's the gap and what can be done?
So the Good ID initiative is an African Union and UN ECA initiative to say that we need to to have interoperable systems. You know, again, if I only have a biometric ID system that works in Togo but cannot be read in the neighboring countries, in Ghana, in Benin, in Nigeria, then it's very difficult for Togolese to move freely to these countries because I can't really identify them there, or to have transactions. So at the African Union level, at the UN ECA level, we want to design a platform which can be interoperable at the African level. The other thing that we are working on is to make sure that most of the countries that are going to start identifying their citizens use an open source platform, because the issue that we face today is that most of the countries are locked into some technology brought by a vendor. And we want to move away from being locked into a system to be able to communicate freely at the continental level, to make sure that every country benefits from any trade agreements that we're implementing right now.
Thank you very much. So perhaps it's just a couple of years before we get to that point when we shall be able to move and trade with each other. I want to move on to Your Excellency, Abubakar, the Minister for State for Mines and Steel Development. But before we discuss mines and steel, my favorite dish in Nigeria is this chilies. And I want to be able to order chilies from a vendor in Nigeria. But I'm told there are two issues. One, I cannot identify the vendor. And two, because of this small issue of the AFCTA, I'm going to have to pay tariffs on chilies. So how much longer before we can address those two issues for me from Kenya?
I know where you want to touch, but I want to tell you that Nigeria is fully on board on the issue of free trade in Africa, and very soon we will join you guys, and you can now enjoy your chili. I will not answer that question here, but I want to tell you that Nigeria regards that free trade agreement important issue, and doing it for Nigeria is doing it for Africa. I want to assure you of that. But coming back to the issue we are facing today, I want to say that for me to answer your question that you are going to ask, I should give a little background to where we are coming from and where we are going, the challenges we are facing. As Africans, it has been very difficult communicating. As Africans, we are facing problem of population, and that trade between even the African countries has become a very, very problematic issue. So if there's any time to seize this opportunity of digitalization, digital trade, digital economy, this is the right time to address that. But the issue is that of infrastructure, and the infrastructure that will support digitalization of our engagements. That has to be supported. But because how many Africans have access to mobile phones? How many Africans has access to internet? All these have to be addressed for us to be able to do anything meaningful. But for now, I want to say we've made progress in Africa, we've made progress in Nigeria when it comes to issue of digital economy, digital trade, and ID. But I must say, this identity is very important. We have an issue in our country today, the IDPs. These are children that were taken from various parts of the country. Today, they've lost their identity because there is no record of their birth, their name, their parents, and for a whole for the whole of their life, they will not be able to identify with either their state or tribe or parents and so on. These are issues we are facing, and these are issues that need to be addressed. And for planning, you cannot plan without statistics. You can't plan for education, you can't plan for health, you can't plan for infrastructure if you don't have data. These are issues that have become a challenge to Africa.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the mining and steel. To what extent is Nigeria prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to open up in this digital age?
These are areas we've been addressing. We believe Nigeria's quest for their diversification has to be done with all sense of responsibility. And we've tried to leverage on technology to diversify our, not reform the mining sector. What we've done first is to look at the area of data. You cannot mine without information. You cannot mine without data. What we've done is to on our data, data we have and in the archiving system. What we have today is you can access our data. We've made it more transparent, more reliable, more credible. Only that can help us in getting our investors to come and invest. We have also digitalized our licensing system. You can stay in your home and apply for mining license, whatever category. We've also established a web portal where most of the mining transaction activities have been optimized. So these are the little reforms we brought into the mining sector as regards licenses, as regards assessing information and so on to make it more transparent for all.
Thank you. It would be remiss of me if, on behalf of all the investors sitting in the room today, I didn't ask you what specific opportunities are there for investors in the Nigerian mining sector that people can meet with you after this and discuss?
Well, for the purpose of where we are and the place we are, Dubai is the hub of gold activities. And Nigeria is highly endowed in gold, and a lot of trading has been going on so far with it. So what we've tried to do is for government to launch a gold purchasing program to encourage artisanal miners that are mining gold and to give them value for what they are doing. So what we are trying to do today is to encourage the gold program, to address the whole value chain from mining to marketing. You mine in Nigeria, process in Nigeria, and possibly sell in Dubai. That we are addressing. We are also trying to leverage on technology to further do more investigation on the minerals we have. We've identified 44 minerals, and we are focusing on about 7 of them: gold, iron ore, limestone, tin, and so on. These are areas we are trying to focus on. And in the area of steel, we have some steel plants that have been moribund for a long time. What we are trying to do is to free this government assets so that investors can come and take over. We are talking of Ajaokuta steel plant where a lot of investors have shown interest. We have the Delta steel plant, which has already been taken. We have the aluminum smelter plant in Ekotobasi, which investors can come and take advantage. So there are a lot of programs going on, and after the exploration works we are doing, we'll have data that is more reliable, data that can be tested anywhere, and that we believe will encourage investors to come in. So the right time to come and invest in Nigeria is now, because government attention to the mining sector has never been the way it is today. So we believe at the end of the day, we'll make room available for all investors that are interested in coming to Nigeria.
Honorable Minister, so if there's an investor in the room who is interested in any of these 44 minerals, please see the Minister after this session. Dr. Lassad, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the issues of digital trade, EID system, e-payment system exist in a background of continental digital infrastructure. Without the infrastructure, the systems will not work. And I know the Africa Development Bank has undertaken a number of initiatives in the area of digital infrastructure and strengthening digital infrastructure across the continent. Perhaps you can share with us what those initiatives have been and what the results have been so far.
Thank you. Let me first rewind a little bit and take a few seconds to thank the UAE Vice President and Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai for hosting us in this wonderful city of Dubai. Thank also and extend the sentiments of President Adesina of the Bank Group to the organizers of this annual investment meeting, as well as thank ECA and Stephen and the team for putting all this session dedicated to Africa together. Thank you, Stephen. Now to your question, I guess we at the African Development Bank believe that the currency of the future is going to be digital, and information technology must not be the elite or the privilege, exclusive privilege of the elite, but we should democratize technology. We believe in a mindset of change. We need to move from BBC, if you know what BBC is born before computers, to rethink education and prepare our youth to the jobs of the future, which are going to be most digital. I'd like to say that I did a small research and I found out that in some reports that if government harness well the potential of internet, Africa can add like $300 billion to its GDP by 2025. So this is great. As to your question, I think that ADB made a big stride in helping Africa and in building skills. And I'd like in that way to talk to you about the initiative that we have, which is the Jobs for the Future initiative. The ADB also has a program of funding 130 coding centers of excellence that are being created in Africa to contribute in the supply of the technology and the digital economy. Of course, the program is not only restricted to coding, and we are working with our partners, Google and Microsoft and Facebook, to build the technical literacy for our youth. So this is a big program that we call Jobs for for the Future program. Other initiatives, well, they are, I cannot talk about all of them, but I chose to talk about also the technological park in Senegal that the bank is helping to put together. It's about 70 million euros. And this is to create a regional cluster of technology that is expected also to contribute to the regional economy by creating almost 150,000 jobs, direct and direct jobs. As you also know that the access to finance is difficult. So what we also thought is we invested in several funds, such as the TLIDE funds, the Partech, and the African Technology Ventures. And this is all to overcome the challenge of access to financing from the SMEs that are focusing on digital economy. We also funded a huge program in Rwanda that is called the Innovation Fund, that is focused also on funding tech-enabled SMEs. So these are few examples of what the bank is trying to do to help into making this happen. I mean, the currency of the future, as I said, is going to be digital. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks for that. I know we'll have a chance to explore it further in the Q&A, but I wanted to move on to a different subject. Majority of Africans are engaged in agriculture. And many of us will be going home from this conference, meeting our parents who are engaged in agriculture, and they'll be asking, what opportunities does the digital age or challenges present for us who are in agriculture? As a former Minister for Agriculture in Tunisia, I think you're uniquely placed to share with us the opportunities you see of digital in agriculture.
Yes, this is a good question. I think the opportunity to transform Africa through technology are endless. And agriculture is one of the sectors that can take advantage of this technology to move ahead. For example, I give the example of Tunisia that I know better than anything else. We are now using drones in agriculture for crops, to monitor crops, to monitor diseases. This is one of the projects that we started when I was in the government in 2014 and 15. And then now that is, we got funding from the Korean, the QUAFEC, through the African Development Bank actually, and that we are using drones now to, as I said, to monitor crops. We are using also technology to monitor computer irrigated systems. So these are a few technologies that we can use in agriculture that can help a lot and move us ahead with better productivity and better growth.
Thank you, Dr. Lassad, for that intervention. I want to move on to Roy. Roy, you've been running a 3D printing company in Kenya for the last 4 years. And many of us, when we hear of 3D, we associate it with the US, Europe, China. Maybe you can tell us something a bit about your company, who you serve, bring it to ground for the ordinary person who doesn't know about 3D printing to understand what need you're addressing, and then what opportunities and challenges do you see? When do you start selling your 3D printers to Nigeria? You have an opportunity. The minister is next to you here. That's a big market for you. So
Thank you. So I run a hardware startup called AB3D. We're based in Nairobi, Kenya. For us, AB3D stands for African-Born 3D Printing. And we exist to lower barriers of access to 3D printing technology locally out of recycled electronic waste parts and other locally available materials. But not just the machines, but also the raw material. So the filament that feeds into the machine, we also extrude that from recycled plastic bottles. And through that, just create easier and more affordable access to the whole 3D printing ecosystem. So for some context, 3D printing is an additive manufacturing process where material is laid down layer by layer, and then you build out whatever it is in whatever design you've made. So it's much faster than other conventional ways of building where you'd have to invest in a mold and then produce your parts. So you can build very intricate designs, and it's perfect for bespoke and niche-based products. You could build bottles, anything. You could put your face on stuff. But the unique thing is every time you need something unique, so say a prosthetic limb or dental dentures and such, 3D printing would be the best way to go. So it's already being used in many other places in the world, in the more developed parts of the world. But what we are trying to do is to leapfrog that and put Africa at the forefront of this development. I keep telling people the fourth industrial revolution is upon us, and 3D printing is one of the core pillars of this revolution. Africa has to do its part to remain relevant in order to fully utilize this. So how we set up was also a story that leveraged digitization in that we took advantage of open source files and fully adapted what we learned to build our machine locally. That means we changed quite a number of things because most of it was based on what we had access to, from the sizes of our bolts and nuts to even the type of metal we have available. All these things influenced what we do, but that was like our first step, which would not have happened if we did not have access to digitization. But not only that, we leverage digitization every day because through that, our customers have been brought closer to us. We target anyone who's building almost anything, from architects to doctors to many people who need tangible products. But because of e-commerce, we have managed to bridge that gap, and sometimes we don't even interact. We don't need to meet our customer. They'll go online, they will see some of the products we offer, they will have specifications of what they need, they'll send us files, we will design, and we'll ship it to them, and it's as easy as that. 3D printing has applications in very many different spaces and spheres. I'd like to share one interesting thing that we printed. In late 2016, there was a set of conjoined twins that were separated at a local hospital in Nairobi, Kenyatta Hospital, which is the biggest public hospital in Kenya. The surgery was the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa, and the twins were joined at the pelvis. So how 3D printing played a role was, in conventional surgery, the doctors would rely on CT scans to try and visualize the internal organs and how everything is set up on the inside. So what we did is created a model of the twins' pelvis, which the doctors then used to rehearse the surgery before ever cutting or penetrating or anything like that. And this helped with the surgery, and the twins are alive and happy and running around in Nairobi today. And that's just one application. There's literally almost every other sphere, and obviously most relevant would be manufacturing and industrialization, which is what we're hoping to get towards. So to the Minister of Nigeria, yes, we are looking forward to the point where we will be able to produce products where we decentralize manufacturing, where anyone can produce anything at a localized level and send it almost anywhere within the continent at an affordable rate.
It's touching to see the humanity in the applications of what you're doing. So what challenges have you faced? What can, from a policy level, what can be done differently to enable you scale up and achieve scale and size in what you're doing?
Obviously, the very first one is access to funds. I don't even think I need to expand on that. What we're trying, the solutions we're trying to build need funds to be injected for them to grow. We need money for inventory. We need money for the team. And the skills is not an issue. It's true. Africa is more than able. We are capable. We have the brains. We have the capacity. It's more around just investing in our own local solutions to grow this to a regional level. I would say another challenge we've already experienced is just transport and freight across the continent and across borders has been very difficult. We have realized that if ever we try to send anything outside East Africa, it costs more than producing the product itself. So obviously the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will go a long way to supporting that. And that's what we're looking forward to, because our growth is now limited to a certain region because of issues to do with border and trade. And another challenge we face on a policy level is many times our policies do not favor the young startups, especially the tech-based startups that perhaps the government does not yet quite understand or has not yet caught on yet. In that, in terms of a business that's generating revenue, we're treated the same way, we are taxed the same way as any other big company, which then sort of stifles our growth. So if there could be some premiums that help us to circumvent this, then that would be very good. Yeah, I always say the future is here, it's now. And what we're trying to do is bring tomorrow's jobs today. And it's already happening. So we need to do our part to remain relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Brilliant. Brilliant. I think I'll first go to Tafazo, but I'll come back to our two honorable ministers here to address some of the issues he has raised, which we've not discussed, which is movement of people within the continent, what we are doing for our young people, the youth, innovation, encouraging innovation. So prepare for that. Tafazwa, she's a Zimbabwean lady who is working in Sierra Leone on solar. Maybe you can tell us about your business, who you're serving, what opportunities you face there, what challenges you face, and what you'd like us to address or the big people here to resolve.
Thank you very much, James, for the question. Just a bit of a background. Easy Solar is providing high quality, life-improving products to low-income communities. These communities, or if you look at rural communities, low-income communities, the standard of living in those areas is very, very low. And that's partly because they're not even able to access good quality products. You have all the poor products that come from all parts of the world ending up in those areas. And what Easy Solar is doing is trying to bring better products to these communities. Now, because the products are better, the prices are higher. And considering the income that these communities have, they're not in a position to pay for the products in one transaction. What we've been able to do using technology is provide credit facilities to communities that are otherwise not even served, which means our customers are able to buy whatever product that they desire over a long period of time, giving them some level of credit that they didn't access before. Through technology, we've been able to provide a banking service, a credit service, to people who have never accessed credit before. This has given us access to an untapped market, an area where nobody has ventured into because of the cost of the logistical costs of going to those regions. Another part of technology that we've been using is being able to just integrate our cash collections, mobile money with our business model. It's not something that you see in a lot of areas if you consider rural communities, if you consider low-income communities, which are grossly just neglected. They're denied a dignified standard of living just because they live in remote areas, just because they don't have enough income to measure up to what companies are expecting to get in terms of their revenues. But through technology, we've been able to do this.
Thank you, thank you. So what challenges are you facing? What can be done to help you scale up to 1 million households in Sierra Leone, expand to the rest of West Africa?
So one of the issues that we have is just an issue of identity. We're selling our products mainly on cash, but also on credit, which is paid through cash. The process involves identifying the customer by their name in an area where there's high illiteracy, which means the names would have different spellings every time a customer is purchasing a product. We have resolved to using mobile numbers, but when you look at mobile numbers as well, people can change their mobile number anytime. So just being able to identify who our customers are and to be able to understand their journey in terms of product acquisition, energy ladder, whatever their experience is difficult. If there's a way that we can centralize identification, and I think this is where digital identity comes in, because through digital identity, we can also integrate payment systems, which makes it very, very simple for a company like ours. The amount of time that we just spend reconciling transactions or trying to identify our customers is significant. And we have less time to focus on expansion, for example, or bringing in new products, or better serving our customers. So if we have a process of identifying our customers, we have simplified the business so much more for a startup like ours. The second thing is just being able to access other markets. And I think this is what Roy was also saying, that we are currently in Sierra Leone, but we realize the level of untapped markets that exist in Liberia, in Guinea. And the process of just getting into those countries, regardless of the fact that they're very, very close to Sierra Leone, that the products that are needed are similar to the products required in Sierra Leone, the process itself is so complicated that it slows us down. We are just a small startup, 3 years old, and we have to invest significantly just to be able to move into another market. I feel like if policy is set up in such a way that our borders become more penetrable, that we are able to operate between countries without so many obstacles in our way, we are going to have a better opportunity of serving the biggest markets in the world, which is the below the poverty line markets, that is a majority of people living in Africa. What is happening right now is there are organizations, foreign companies that are able to come and better serve our own customers, our own people, better than we are able to do, just because within Africa, we are restricting each other so much.
I think that's powerful. So, I have a question for which Steve can respond, the minister can respond, Her Excellency Siano can respond. For the last 10 years, I've been following AU discussions. We've discussed this issue of free movement of people within the continent, reducing cost of transport to the agenda. Now I'm speaking on behalf of the young people who are not there in the panel discussions at the AU. What's happening? When will we as Africans be able to, why is it easier for somebody to access our continent from outside the continent than from within the continent? Let's put it that way. Maybe you can tell us what is going on. Maybe we start with the person who is based in Addis.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I think it's good to say that we've made progress. The African Development Bank does actually publish the Visa Openness Index. And it is true that today it is possible for an African to go to many African countries, arrive at the airport, get a visa upon arrival. This was not the situation a few years ago. So let's first of all accept that countries are doing very well. However, we have an issue. The issue is, under the Abuja Treaty, we do have the protocol on the free movement of people and the right of establishment, and that's the question that you are asking. So the protocol has been agreed, and it has actually been signed by very many African countries. That's what happened actually last year. The only problem is we only have one country, and that is Rwanda, that has ratified. And I think we need to say thank you to Rwanda, because Rwanda is showing the way on this issue of free movement of persons. So the instruments are there. I think it's a question of the African countries saying we have signed this agreement, this protocol, and going ahead to ratify it so that it can make it possible for us to move across. And I think that is where now the governments and the politicians come in. So maybe I should leave it to the two ministers to tell us a bit more from the political angle. Why is it that we have the protocol, it has been signed, but countries are not ratifying, and we cannot optimize the African continental free trade area unless we are able to move freely across the borders?
So you kicked the ball to the politicians, a politician on my right and on my left. Ladies first, Her Excellency Siano.
Thank you very much for this, this opportunity. It comes down to biometric ID again, because if you want to come to Togo, we don't have any problems. We want, Africans to be able to come to Togo. The question is, how do we identify them? And that's the issue of, having a protocol that works. I think that Togo belongs to the countries with others who said that if you're an African, you just don't need a visa anymore to come to Togo. But it raises questions in terms of security, and you all know that right now, security is a big issue in Africa. In West Africa, we have countries that face challenges, and so it's very important for us to find a way to be able to interconnect our database on people who can move from a country to another. So that's why the work we've been, and things that we're talking about in this room, the work we've been doing in biometric ID is so important, because we want to be able to create, a continent, to have a continent that is truly the land of opportunity. It's really heartbreaking to hear that you would be in Sierra Leone, wanting to go to Guinea and other countries, and it would be so difficult for you, and you're a startup. We never, as government, we don't want to hear this type of things, because we want to make sure that we create opportunities for small companies. So I think that it's on us to make sure that we deploy as fast as possible our biometric ID systems, and that we make sure that with the help of the UNECA, with the AU, that we have systems in countries that talk to each other from, Togo to the rest of Africa.
Thank you, Excellency. I want to move on to Your Excellency. Nigerians are very aggressive businessmen, and they're crying. They want to come and set up businesses in Togo, in Kenya, in East Africa. So when do you ratify this treaty so that they can move out? Your market is small, only 300 million. Africa is 1 billion. You can tell us more about it.
Well, thank you very much. I will still want to emphasize on what she just said, and it has to do with identification. And while you will want to accommodate everybody, and protocols are signed, but it's easy to sign protocols, but the reality on ground is very important. Today, we have a country like Nigeria that accommodates a lot of people, but you cannot clearly say this is the identity of those being accommodated. So you have to be first a Nigerian before you are African. You have to be a Togolese before you are African. So we have to address this issue of identity first before we can implement this protocol. This is very important. Important in the sense that we are facing a lot of security challenges. As Africans, we love to trade with Africans. We want to accommodate our brothers. We believe the potentials are there. You've just heard what he is doing in Kenya and what she is doing in Syria alone. These are things we should encourage. We have no choice. The population is getting bigger and the challenges are getting more. Our people are dying in the desert, trying to cross over to Europe. Our people are dying in the Mediterranean. We cannot continue like that. Our responsible politicians and government leaders, these are issues that have to be addressed. And that's why you see us coming here always to talk about the opportunities and the possibilities that are there in Africa. For a long time, we had investors that come to Africa because they love our resources. But that love for our resources has not translated for the love of our people and our country. These are issues we want to change. These are the narratives we want to change. Trading with Africans will help, but there are still challenges. Challenges of communication, challenges of identity. Even in the West African countries, you see the French-speaking African countries think it differently from the Anglo-speaking countries. So it's not just easy to allow this free movement as you see it. What is happening in Brexit? It has to do with movement. So these are issues that first, there are things that are fundamental for this integration that need to be addressed by various countries before we can trade as brothers and sisters. We can move freely. Today, even if you have the free movement, how do I move from Abuja to Niamey, which is just a few hours? There is no air link between us and them. We don't have these railways. We don't have roads. We have security challenges. You cannot travel from one African country to the other without facing all these challenges. So these challenges just have to be addressed before we can implement what we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, let's give our wonderful panel a round of applause. So we've done well on time. We have about 20 minutes for Q&A. And then I'll give Stephen Karingi 5 minutes to close the session at 25 minutes past 11. So if you have any burning question, let's get some questions. There's a gentleman on the right there. Who has the microphone? Is there anyone with a microphone for the questions? Oh, Steve, why don't you pass on that mic? Just pass that mic to the, yeah.
Thank you, James. Now, I think this is an exciting conversation, and I think this is an exciting conversation. I have 3 takeaways. Number one is that what I would like to share with you is that there is no ideal governance standard when it comes to digitization. This evolves over time, and across the world, these governance standards are evolving. Number 2, data quality, I hear from you, is a big issue. So that's another point, very big issue. Number 3, the data exists. Industry 4.0, it's all about the speed of automation and the data exchange. So data does exist, and I think this conversation for us as Africans, we can have and continue it in the continent. So I'd like to have a different spin to this conversation, and a little contribution. When I came in here, I was in the plane full of promoters of various projects who were coming to Dubai to look for investors to be able to do and fund their projects in the continent. When I came to Dubai, I met quite a few investors who were dying for projects in the continent that they would like to fund, because they do have the resources. And I've had extensive conversations with investors from this conference and other engagements I've had in Dubai who are desperately looking for our projects. So great, digitization, wonderful. Data quality would evolve, but I'd like to share with you a little example where data has been used positively to accelerate the rate of promotion of...
Sorry, let me please just restrict yourself to the question because there are many people who want to
Well,
ask questions.
it's a question, it's not really a question, it's just information.
Yeah.
Number one, I think you have a situation where for the investors and the promoters, to make it easy, there is a platform that is going on for investments in the continent. You have the African Investment Forum, which has been put in place by Afrexim Bank, Africa 50, Trade and Development Bank, Africa Development Bank, Asia Islamic Development Bank, European Investment Bank, they've all, Trade and Development Bank, I think I mentioned, AFC, they've all come together and they are funding projects across the continent. Data has been used to create a digital database where you have the projects on the database and a platform, and investors have access to this platform where you could actually see the projects, you see what the projects are all about. So data quality has been refined and you know who you're dealing with. My contribution then is, please get on that platform. You will be able to match investors and promoters, which is at the end of the day, I believe what most people here are here for. They want to make some money. They know all about these digital conversations, but they would like to make some money.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the contribution I'd like to make.
So the point is there's a platform that exists and we should use those platforms. So I think let's establish some protocol. Let's just state your name, the country you're from, and restrict yourself to the question. Just ask a question. So there's a gentleman at, who's the microphone? Yeah, the lady, yeah, okay.
Good morning, everybody.
Please stand up here. Yeah.
My name is Mrs. Tisha, African Consular Chambers in Addis Ababa. Just come to the digital point. I would just want to make a small remark. I think Mr. Stephen raised it. What I can just say shortly is not a real question, but just to say African countries should learn how to take an example. We was talking about the free movement of people. Ethiopia have done, Rwanda also. I think, Your Excellency, that can be good to work with those countries to see how they manage that. Now in Ethiopia, all Africans can come and get a visa. I think we should also learn to take an example to another country, just to say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good intervention. Let's get a gentleman. Let's get on this side. There's the gentleman at the back there. Then we'll come to... Okay, it's okay. Then next.
Thank you very much. I'm Bemba Kabo from Sierra Leone. The issue is not arriving at the airport. Let's not run away from the fact. The issue is when you are going across the road borders. So if I'm in Freetown, I want to go to Conakry, that's where the hassle is. It's not across moving. The airports are normally better. The issue is road movement. So if I'm moving from Sierra Leone to Guinea, I have no business to fly because there's just 2 connections per week. So, but I might need to go by road, and that is where the hassle is. Thank you.
To it, the road issue. Yeah, the lady there, then the gentleman.
Hi. Hello, can you hear me? Hi, my question is to Easy Solar. So it's a great job what you're doing, taking technology to the people who are not accessible to that. But I want to find out from the investor's point of view, what about the recovery of the credit facilities that you're giving? Can you give us some figures on that so that it will be easier for investors to understand how the credit that you provide is recovered?
Okay, so it's a question on credit risk. I think we'll come back to that. The gentleman at the...
Peter Irwin from Atos Holdings. Yesterday I chaired the family office conference. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Peter Irwin from Atos Holdings. Yesterday I had the honor of chairing the family office component in the investor section and had some very stimulating meetings in the investors hub. My question is to our honored minister from Nigeria and friends from the development banking world regarding stimulating interest from ultra high net worths and family offices, who are often the catalysts for the initial 1 million, 5 million, 50 million, 100 million into certain initiatives. What are the initiatives that you think are important, number one, and how do you feel you can make it more easy for these people, for ultra net worths to access your investments in your nations more effectively? Thanks.
Is what we can do to stimulate interest from ultra high net worth family offices, investors in investing in our continent. High net worth, yeah. There was a question next. Who's the microphone? Okay, let's take a question.
My name is Olumbe Akinkugbe from Ondo State Government in Nigeria. My question is for the gentleman from the Africa Development Bank. I believe that you cannot talk about digitization without thinking about the underlying infrastructure. For example, in Nigeria, we know we have hundreds of terabytes of broadband capacity in country. However, we are having issues with the last mile connectivity. So are there any initiatives from the AFDB with regards to deepening the penetration, assisting state governments like ours, or the country in general, in providing broadband infrastructure to the last mile? That's my question. Thank you.
The question is on broadband infrastructure and what is being done. Are there any questions before we take these ones? We can take one last one and then 1, 2.
Thank you. Just a quick one. Okay.
Go first. Yeah.
A quick one. Through these interventions, we can notice that many things are happening in the continent. But we should make sure that the systems that have been developed in the country, digital ID, because it is happening in Mauritius, in Rwanda, in many countries, in Zambia, it is happening. It is important at the end of the day that all those systems can be integrated in the continental framework. Otherwise, it will be the duplication for nothing. Thank you.
I think High Excellency Siano will address the issue of integration and interfacing of the systems. So when we finish. One last question, then we respond to those first.
Good morning, gents. My name is Helio Alves. I'm from Angola, and I've got a question regarding digital identification. So we know that this type of identification can reduce the bureaucracy and lessen the time of paperwork processing as well. My question goes on this manner. How can digital ID facilitate the process analysis for access to credit or financing for project owners within the country and outside the continent?
Question directed to? Steve, did you get the question? Okay. So let's first let the panel address those questions. Let's start with Tafazwa on credit risk.
Sure. So our amounts at risk 30 days is averaging 5%, and amounts at risk for 90 days is averaging 7 to 11%. I think what has been pleasantly surprising in Sierra Leone and amongst our customers is we have a very, very low default rate. Our customers are proving to be credit worthy, which actually then goes to explain or show why it's unfair for them to be excluded from the financial services.
Thank you for that succinct response, Dr. Lafal.
Thank you. I'd like to say a few things about, somebody talked about the initiatives from the bank and also the broadband. I think the question is a matter of attitude. It's not a matter of lack of funds. And if you'd have asked me this a year ago, I would have told you probably, why do you want to have an investor from Asia or from America to come and invest in Africa, while you cannot convince an investor from Namibia to go to Mozambique to invest, for example? But then, when you think about it, this is all about is to improve the lives of people, what you are doing. And then to improve their lives, we need to have an inclusive growth. To have the growth, you have to have the investments. And then I would like to link it with what our colleague from ADB had just said, and probably we cut him short. The African Investment Forum last year in Joburg, in 72 hours, and this is what the President Adesina, when I first talked to him about this, he told me when you look at Africa, investors, they see only risk and risk and risk. But then when we had the team working together and the attitude was right and we prepared the initiative, in 72 hours, we were able to close about 45 deals worth around $40 billion. This is about 40 or 50% of what all other multilateral banks do in a year. So this is great, and I'd like to say that my colleague Ebi here, who just first talked, go on this platform and see all the opportunities that are there. This is great. This is the opportunity for Africa and the opportunity for other investors outside from Africa to come and invest. There are projects there, well-prepared projects. So get onto that platform, and if you need any help, just talk to Ebi and he will help you with that. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention. And Roy, you can put your project on the platform and you may get African investors to come in and put in money, and we can see Ebi after this. So before I get to the politicians, I want to go to Stephen. I think there were some questions that were directed at you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the key question that was the point that was made by Thierry from COMESA, the interoperability of digital ID systems. We are actually promoting this as one of the good principles of digital IDs in Africa. Otherwise, without the interoperability, as the minister said, it will not be possible for us to have the kind of trust that you need to facilitate free movement of people. In addition, for us to be able to have digital trade take place. Now, which then brings me to the question from the colleague from Angola, where he's asking the link between the digital ID systems and the issues of credit and finance, if I got you correctly. I think the example of what we had happening from Sierra Leone, in a way, answers your question, that first of all, just being known who you are, it gives confidence to the creditors. And it allows them to use the data that they collect about you or about other participants, of course, to reduce maybe the premiums that they charge when they give you credit. So I think digital IDs are going to allow the building of trust between consumers of credit and finance and the providers of credit and finance, both in terms of the public and the private sector. So that's the link that I see, and the example we had from Sierra Leone is a very, very practical example of how it's also facilitating inclusion of people in the remotest part of our continent, or the last mile, as they call it sometimes.
Thank you for that intervention. I think there were two questions that we've not addressed. One was on the gentleman who raised a question on non-tariff barriers. When even you built the road to Niamey and people get to the road, the new barriers that are put at the point of entry, and that's a challenge you've been facing even in the EAC, which are non-tariff barriers, which I think would be useful to hear from the politicians. And then the other question was what we can do to stimulate investment from high net worth family offices. I did attend the panel. There's interest from investors to invest in Africa. But what can we do to make our environment more investor friendly for those investors to come and put money in Roy's company or in a company or in infrastructure, for example? In no particular order, maybe I can start off with His Excellency. Any comment on those two questions?
Thank you very much. Well, he answered and asked a question, because the issue is not just arriving at the airport, but the volume of trade we are talking about. How many people uses the airports? We want to be able to move by road, just like he said, by train and the rest of them, even by donkeys, the things we used to do before now. But the movement is restricted because of these things I'm talking about. Particularly now that we are facing a lot of challenges, people just coming in from different parts of Africa and creating a lot of problems in other African countries. We are witnessing that in Nigeria, it's happening in Mali and some other countries. But these are issues that as leaders we have to sit down to address. But there are challenging issues that I've said that has to do with infrastructure. Unless this infrastructure is put in place and the security issues are addressed, it will not work. Talking of making our countries more investment friendly, yes, exactly what we are doing here. We come in here to tell you the incentives we have in place, what we have and what will attract you, but we keep repeating the message everywhere we go in the world, in China, in England, and we've not seen commensurate results from the message we've been sending out. It's either we are sending the message wrongly, or you are not understanding our message, or it's a deliberate attempt not to allow us to grow. If you look at Africa, this is where to go. It's still a green area, the possibilities are there, the opportunities are there, the population is there, the raw materials required for whatever we want to do today is there in Africa. Even the contemporary raw materials like lithium, tin, lead zinc, what you want to use for electric cars are there. But we are not getting that movement the way we want it. Sitting close to you is our DG, Nigerian Investment Promotion Corporation. She will tell you more about the incentives Nigeria has put in place to attract investors. For us in the mining sector, we've made our license regime easy. You can get license within 2 days. We've given you tax relief, at least 3 to 4 years tax relief. You can bring in your mining equipment duty-free. You can repatriate your monies after doing business to your various countries. This we've put in place. And we are still sending the message, and you should come to Nigeria. If there is a time to come to Nigeria or Africa, it's now. Africa is there in need of investment to address some of the challenges we have, to transform some of these raw materials that we need to address the whole value chain, as long as you will operate in accordance with our laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your efforts have not been in vain. Last year, FDI to Africa grew by 6%, and globally it actually declined. So just to encourage you, don't give up in what you're doing. So maybe we can hear some closing remarks from Her Excellency. We have run out of time. We have 4 minutes left. So, and we'll just have 1 minute for one sentence for everybody. We'll come back to you, Tafa. So let's hear from Her Excellency, then we can.
So I think that a lot of the comments that were made are pushing us towards having a platform that can communicate, that are interoperable. I was thinking of the road issue. You're right. We need to make sure that we have roads from one capital city to another capital city, that we don't need to take the plane. From Lomé to Accra, when you take the plane, it's a 20 minutes ride. So it doesn't make any sense to take the plane. One should be taking the road, which is 3 hours. But again, and the ideas that Togo, Benin, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria have is to build a highway. It requires specific, financing structure, but it also requires database, again, biometric ID, and ID system to talk to each other. Because what we want to do is that when a citizen leaves a country, the database, you swipe your card to say, I've left Togo. The same card you've swiped must be read by Benin to know that you're entering Benin, or by Ghana that you're entering Ghana. So it comes down to having systems that are interoperable. And that's why it's so important to think of all these issues at a higher level than just the country level. That's why it's important to integrate the the African Union in the conversation, or the UN in the conversation. So these are not individual efforts, these are continental wide efforts, and that's what we've been doing. We've been thinking in those terms to say we're not doing this for us government, we're doing this for the people. And if we're doing this for the people, we have to make sure that it's very convenient for them, Thank you very much.
One sentence from...
my parting words would be, Africa's biggest asset, from my point of view, are the young people. And if we really want to move funds into Africa, we need to start looking for ways of creating a pipeline of investments through supporting young startups, young innovative individuals who have ideas that are moving with the trends right now.
Thank you, Tafa. Dr. Lassad, closing remark?
One sentence, or just like my previous colleagues, one paragraph?
No, you're a professor. One sentence. One sentence.
Well, I just want to say that digital is here and is going to stay with us for a while. This is the currency of the future. We need to work together to set up coherent standards, and stop for us who are BBC, as I said, born before computers. We need to move and rethink our education systems and retool the young generation to be prepared for the jobs of the future.
Thank you, Dr. Lassad. Roy? One sentence?
I'll just echo what Tafadzo said. Listen to the youth. We have a voice and we have a lot to say. And support us as we try to create local solutions to our local problems. Thank you.
Your Excellency? One sentence.
One sentence. Digital trade, digital ID, digital economy has become something that cannot be ever overemphasized in Africa. We need it, and we need it now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Stephen, maybe you can wrap up.
Thank you. If we do everything that the colleagues here in the panel have said, then Africa's transformation will be realized. And indeed, Africa's transformation is already happening. All we need to do is to scale it up, and the digitalization gives us that opportunity for the scaling up.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this session. I know there are many more questions that you'd have wanted to ask, but we've unfortunately run out of time. Let us put our hands together and appreciate the contribution of our colleagues here. It's been an amazing panel. We look forward to carrying on in this discussion, maybe in Togo, where we might have more time. We are visitors here, so we have to leave the room now. But maybe in Togo, we might have 2 hours or 3 hours to carry on with this conversation. So we look forward to carrying on these conversations on the continent. Thank you very much.